that. Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. How do you know when you're living in a world that's gone insane? Well, here's a suggestion. When people start dancing on the freeway at 20 after 1 in the morning, I think that would be a pretty good indicator. This is from The Guardian. Summer Taylor, protester killed in Seattle, honored for standing up for Black lives. Taylor was killed in Seattle on Saturday when a man drove his car into a crowd protesting against police brutality. Protesting. I see. This protest march was called Black Femme March. It takes I-5. Now, it's curious because the two women who were hit while dancing, doing the Harlem Shuffle, something like that, at 1:20 a.m. on Interstate 5, which is the major north-south artery between Canada and Mexico. Pretty important highway. But the two women who were hit, Summer Taylor and Diaz Love, not black and not femmes, very much butch, covered in tattoos. The media has been going with the one picture of this unfortunate woman, which makes her look fairly normal, but her head is tilted to one side. With purple hair, you can't see that she has shaved one side of her head. I'm a little at a loss to understand how lesbian dancing is a protest against police brutality. What had happened is that for over 2 weeks, or close to three weeks, so-called protesters had been announcing that they intended to occupy Interstate 5 late at night or early in the morning. And so the state police stopped enforcing the law. Now, the interstate was supposedly blocked, but a car, a Jaguar, managed to get onto it. And then if you see the video, and it is quite horrifying, so you've been warned. The person driving the car swerves out of the way to hit a large number of people, and then plows into Taylor and Diaz. And it looks like Taylor has been actually cut in half by this. But here is the amusing thing about this, that these protesters have been talking about how the man isn't going to shut them down, and the man has been trying to kill them. All they're doing is, occupying freeway, but the man is trying to kill them, and these are right-wingers, supposedly white supremacists. Let's see how many paragraphs it takes for The Guardian to identify the man who has been arrested. Oh, okay, here we go. Bear with me here, okay? This is what we call in the business burying the lead. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16th paragraph. The driver of the car which hit the crowd, DeWitt Coletti, who is black, is in custody, awaiting a court hearing on Monday. Collette of Seattle drove the car around vehicles that were blocking I-5 and sped into the crowd about 1:40 a.m., according to a police report. Video taken at the scene by protesters showed people shouting, "Car, car," before fleeing the roadway. Oh, a Seattle man. Actually, it appears that he is from Africa, from northeast Africa, specifically Ethiopia or Eritrea. He is an immigrant to the United States. And intersectionality. Gotta love it, right? Let's see. The person who was killed, Summer Taylor, 24, spent the last 6 weeks tirelessly standing up for others while working full-time and supporting everyone around them. Oh, yes, both of these women are non-binary and prefer the pronoun they. Wrote Urban Animal on Instagram, the veterinarian clinic where Taylor worked in Portland, Oregon. So she'd come all the way from Portland to Seattle for this. I don't know. Interstate 5, is it a big, now a big lesbian pickup place? Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is. Taylor, who the Post said, I'm not going to finish this. Anyone who works for Urban Animal will tell you that Summer Taylor's laugh makes any bad day better. Kamala Harris, a U.S. Senator and former Democratic presidential candidate from California, was among those honoring Taylor on social media on Sunday. She tweeted, "Absolutely heartbreaking. Summer Taylor was only 24 years old, peacefully protesting for Black Lives Matter when they were struck by a car, thinking of their family during this difficult time and everyone in the movement of today." There was a similar message from Jenny Durkin, the mayor of Seattle. None of these women pointed out the obvious, that having a party on an interstate highway is a dangerous thing to do. But no, it's protest. It's peaceful protest, and peaceful protest must be honored at all times. There's a Seattle police seek motive after driver hits protesters, killing one. Well, again, the media was a little economical with the actuality in this, because it is clear that the black man in the Jaguar, he was attempting to avoid the people on the highway. But I guess he figured it was a freeway, and so there would be lots of cars going fast instead of 100, hundreds of people dancing in the dark. Heavy, which is the go-to site for this sort of thing, has a tribute to the Seattle protester who was run over. There's a joke going around that her last action in life was to get a black man arrested. One friend called Taylor a blinding light in an otherwise dark world. A coworker and friend was senselessly murdered while fearlessly standing up for what they believed in. We all love you and we all miss you, Summer. You were blinded. Yeah, we heard that bit already. The other struck protester, Diaz Love, 32, it's absolutely remarkable that woman survived. And she's speaking now. Bad things happen when basic traffic laws are not followed. You're not going to hear very much about this next story for an obvious reason. This is from the Daily Caller. An 8-year-old girl was shot July the 4th in Atlanta during a night marked by violence. The girl was shot in the area near where Rayshard Brooks was killed, and Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms told protesters Sundays that it's time to clear out. The child was riding in the car with her mother and her mother's adult friend just before 10 p.m. when the incident occurred. The driver tried to enter a parking lot near the intersection of University Avenue and Pryor Road when the car was blocked by a group of armed individuals, one of whom began shooting into the vehicle. Multiple shots fired into the vehicle. The girl was immediately taken to Atlanta Medical Center after she was shot but did not survive, according to the report. The shooting occurred near the Wendy's where Rayshard Brooks was fatally shot during a struggle with police last month. Brooks's death escalated protests that had already been ongoing since the death of George Floyd. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Bottoms said during the press conference on the shooting that it's time for people to clear out of that area where Rayshard Brooks was shot. This discussion, this mediation, and it's over. At a point where an 8-year-old baby is killed, the discussions have ended. Well, 8-year-olds aren't babies. This is a very sad story, horrific story. But if Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms had bothered to uphold the law, well, this 8-year-old probably would still be alive today. Yes, the sacred space in Atlanta, the site of the burned out Wendy's. Let's have a look at the chat. Genius Bar. Cupid Dance. Yeah, I forgot the name of it. I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is. She was doing a live stream when she was hit, says our moderator, Chad Chadson. Yes, indeed she was. Horrified when I saw the vid. These past few weeks have emptied my natural resource of empathy. Strange feeling. Josh Randall, good to see you. Well, good to see you. Chocokin 666, they haphazardly dumped 2 unlit cars in the middle of an interstate. Metal Mike says, Bruce Springsteen song reference. Yeah, it was a little bit, except that they were literally dancing in the dark. Quachalango says, KMG, how's the Eritrean restaurant scene in Victoria? I wouldn't know. I don't really go to restaurants. Interestingly, in recent years, I have spoken out for a Canadian company doing business in Eritrea, a mining company. So I have all these Eritrean people praising me on Twitter. Ethiopia seems to be determined to crush Eritrea at the behest of the United States government for reasons that are mysterious to me. I don't want those people here. On the other hand, I don't want them persecuted in their own country. William Hicks says something rude about Kamala Harris. David Wright says, they have finally done it to me. Human death doesn't even move me anymore. I shall pray. Well, that's always a good idea. When I first read about Michael Brown, the gentle giant in Ferguson, Missouri, that when it was explained to me that he had stolen a box of cigars from a grocery store to make blunts, and then he had strong-armed the owner of the store, making it robbery, a serious offense, that he and his confederate had walked down the highway, in the middle of the highway. And I thought this was some sort of right-wing troll, because obviously black people don't walk down the middle of the highway. And then I found out that I had been naive, that this is quite common in the United States. Brandon Smith says, external airbags coming. Oh, you stole my thunder about the Wendy's, Kevin. Was typing as you said when needed to be said. McChuck the Buck Norris says, Ottawa has made masks mandatory in public places. Yeah, of course they have, because the COVID-19 epidemic has been busted, but we can't have people going about their daily lives. We just can't have that. Okay, so again, this feeling of complete and utter unreality that I know a lot of people are doubting their sanity. It was July the 4th on Saturday, and I hope that my American friends had an agreeable day. What's Donald Trump doing? Well, I've heard once again the suggestion, the hypothesis, if you will, that the Democrats and the media and the military are trying to lure Trump into some sort of race war, and that he is resisting. And he's resisting because, well, look, we all know what it would take to put down this insurrection. If say 50 to 100 people were killed, that would be the end of it. You wouldn't hear any more from these people. But no, that's not going to happen. And Trump is clearly not going to be drawn into this. And I really think that it is a possibility that the military might be planning a coup against him. He wrote earlier today, corrupt Joe Biden and the Democrats don't want to open schools in the fall for political reasons, not for health reasons. They think it will help them in November. Wrong. The people get it. If these teachers don't want to work, why are they still being paid? That's the question that I have. We were talking about this last week, that children go several months without school. Doesn't that rather suggest that school is not as important as we have made it out to be? Again, schools must open in the fall, Donald Trump says. And, let's see. We'll talk about football here. They named teams out of strength, not weakness, but now the Washington Redskins and Cleveland Indians, two fabled sports franchises, look like they're going to be changing their names in order to be politically correct. Indians, like Indian Warren, must be very angry right now. And NASDAQ hits all-time high. I wish he would just stop with that. The equity markets are not the economy. Here's a tweet from today which caused the most controversy. As Bubba Wallace apologized to all of those great NASCAR drivers and officials who came to his aid, stood by his side, and were willing to sacrifice everything for him, only to find out that the whole thing was just another hoax. That and flag decision has caused lowest ratings ever. Well, Bubba Wallace he's not bending on this issue. When I was discussing him, I guess a couple of weeks ago, I found out rather to my surprise that he's really a mediocre driver. But Colin Kaepernick, whose last two seasons in the NFL, his quarterback rating was, I believe, in both years below 50. He's a wealthy man now because you don't need to be very good at your sport to make a lot of money. If you can be a figurehead for woke capital. It's all BLM all the time. There is this woman's not important, okay, but I'm just going to quote from her to give you an idea of what the academy is like now, or just what it's like in Canada, or the fact that people pay attention to this. This is the woman's name is Eternity Martis. She is an award-winning journalist, author of the best-selling book, They Said This Would Be Fun, Race, Campus Life, and Growing Up Been Smooth Since Days of Dunkaroos. Okay. Here's a quotation from this book, They Said This Would Be Fun, which I gather is a book-length whine about being a Black student at Western University in Ontario. Quote, multiracial bodies are heavily politicized sites of learning and possibility. We are uncomfortable conversations and messy identity politics. I'm just going to repeat that again. See whether you can make any sense out of this, because I cannot. Multiracial bodies are heavily politicized sites of learning and possibility. We are uncomfortable conversations and messy identity politics. When she talks about multiracial bodies, is she talking about institutions that are multiracial, or is she talking about people who are multiracial? And haven't they been racialized? This was retweeted by Minal Matani, Muslim Iranian South Asian professor, critical race / geography / journalism, senior advisor to provost on racialized faculty, former radio host. So Eternity's book has just come out, and she has a lot of people plugging it for her. I don't know what her banner is. It could be a Black drag queen. I don't really want to misgender anyone or assume anyone's race. Too dangerous. It's finally here. My memoir. They said this would be fun. It's been a 10-year journey of laughter, learning, and growth. I hope you'll feel it in these pages. You can pre-order now. it took you 10 years to write a book, a memoir about your time in university. Yeah, we keep hearing about how blacks or people of color, am I still allowed to use that word? People of color? It seems it's becoming more problematical with the day. Fatima Saeed tweets some personal, daunting news. Let's make some change. The new Canadian Association of Journalists wrapped up its very first virtual meeting this weekend. Many exciting things to come, etc., etc. There's a lot of non-white faces there, I must say. Jenny Hygen Wills tweets, I'm seeing a lot of transracial adoptees sharing their experiences here. I know some must have reported these, mostly at school events at home. I know this because this is how we learned ways to test white fragility and the conditions of kinship when we are small, small, small. The question was, what was your earliest racist experience? And this Twitter feed is just this again and again and again, a sort of racialized word salad, if you will. Hannah Sung tweets of the book. Have you read this yet? It's a book I wish had been there when I went to university 5,000 years ago. Beautifully written social commentary with all the reality, too real, of what it's like to be in a school while navigating race and whiteness of the institution. Highly recommended. Well, Hannah Sung is Chinese, and there are an awful lot of Chinese in Canadian universities. I don't really think she had any problem with being othered. But this woman, this is Kristen Moriah, okay? She's an assistant professor of African American literary studies at Queen's University. How anti-Black racism on Canadian university campuses robs us all. Oh, do tell. I attended Western University in the early 2000s with a cohort of first-generation Black Canadian friends from my high school in Ajax, Ontario. At Western, we became active in the Black Student Association. The BSA pushed the Department of English to offer a course on African American literature. They were reportedly told by the reigning chair that there was no need to do so since there were so few Black students on campus. Black Canadian literature dates back to the late 18th century. Of course it does. As do critiques of Canadian racism. Yeah, there wasn't a Canada then, but never mind. In this moment, prominent young Black Canadian writers and activists emerging from a white supremacist Canadian university student are writing and speaking openly about the ways their experiences in higher education have shaped their activism. Two recently published memoirs by Black Canadian writers look at racism on campus and critique systemic racism, anti-Blackness, and police brutality in Canada. Desmond Cole's The Skin We're In includes a vignette from his time at Queen's University. In it, Cole remembers being stopped by two police officers late one evening while taking his usual shortcut across campus. The cops left me waiting in the glare of the headlights as they presumably ran my name through their computer. I was so afraid. I thought about screaming for help. If anything happened, I feared no one would hear me. One of the officers finally returned with my ID, and when I asked him why he'd stopped me, he casually offered that there'd been some suspicious activity in the area. Over the course of the next few years, I would be stopped or followed dozens of times by the police in Kingston or Toronto. Just a suggestion. If you get stopped by the police because you're making a shortcut through a college campus at night, perhaps you should stay on the sidewalks. Oh, no less chilling are the experiences of journalist Eternity Martist. In her searing memoir, They Said This Would Be Fun, the writer depicts London, Ontario, where Western University is based, and elite Canadian spaces like it as terrifying sites of racial aggression, where white privilege runs unchecked and young Black students are left to fend for themselves. While on campus, Martis experiences a vicious racist verbal assault, and in reporting to campus security is told that despite the school's zero tolerance policy for discrimination, there are no cameras witnessing the event, so there will be no follow-up. When she asks what happens if the attacker repeats his act again, she's told, well, hopefully someone will report it and we'll be able to get him then. Yeah, I bet that's exactly what happened. No question about it, because they just don't care about racism. Canadian universities. Oh dear. Oh dear. This is from the Post Millennial, from Sam Edwards. Black Lives Matter Toronto leader believes white people are subhuman, calls them genetic defects. A social media post has resurfaced from a BLM Toronto co-founder in which she apparently argues that white people are subhuman and recessive genetic defects. Yusra Kogali wrote the post on what appears to be her Facebook and attempted to use a genetic explanation involving melanin production to explain why white people are defects. It has now gone viral after it was shared by scholar James Lindsay, who introduced it, a charming message from the head of BLM Toronto, who has been honored by the City of Ontario. That's not right, City of Ontario, the Province of Ontario, for exemplary leadership. It's amusing. Whoa. Whiteness is not hum-Xness. Yeah, X. In fact, white skin is sub-hum-Xn. All phenotypes exist within the black family, and white people are a genetic defect of blackness. White people have a higher concentration of enzyme inhibitors. Ooh, sounds scientific. That suppress melanin production. They are genetically deficient because melanin is present at the inception of life. Melanin is directly linked to fertility and the human reproductive system. Melanin is directly linked to strong bones. Melanin is directly linked to the strength of the nervous system, and it goes on. This is why the ingenuity of all hum-Xity comes from blackness. We are the first and strongest of humans, and our genetics are the foundation of all hum-Xnity. Melanin is essential for the efficient performance of all the body natural functions. White people are recessive genetic defects. This is factual. White people need white supremacy as a mechanism to protect their survival as a people because all they can do is produce themselves. Black people, simply through their dominant genes, can literally wipe out the white race if we had the power to. Yeah, try again with that last sentence there. It is why white supremacy as an imperial system thrives. It tries to control, suppress, and destroy our existence in blackness because we are a threat to the genetic annihilation of white people. A threat to... Wow. Did you ever wonder how black people, after centuries of colonial violence, genocide, and destruction, no matter what systems created to make us extinct, now we keep coming back? It is because we are super hum-Xans. Again, that is from Yusra K. Ali, although she was using some other name previously. Oh yes, and here's a tweet from 2016. Please, Allah, give me strength to not kill these men and white folks out here today. Please, please, please. The posts have since been deleted following heavy backlash. She sounds like a delightful young woman, doesn't she? Oh, and there's people accusing her of racism, which is, that's a losing battle, because racism only works one way. And we all know that by now, don't we? Protesters rage outside anti-Semitic food store in London. Well, in Toronto, rather. I'll be getting to that soon enough. Oh yeah, white privilege. The Canadian National Department of Defense is investigating a 2016 complaint about a racist flyer on an office fridge. Supervisor who had put up flyer with racial slur in 2016 suspended last week, CBC News has learned. The original complaint was launched by Andrea Kenny, a black employee, in the spring of 2017. She said she was shocked when she first saw the image in late 2016. It's a meme. I won't explain it. Get into trouble. Here's the explanation from the CBC. This image was put up in a common area at DND in 2016. CBC has blurred some of the offensive terms. It was circulating on social media at the time and led to an investigation by the US-based monitoring group Media Matters. It was found to be fake. No such moving company exists, and said it was circulating on racist websites. CBC is publishing the image to show the gravity of what the employee faced in her workplace. The gravity of it all. Crippling gravity. Yes, there is a restaurant on Bloor Street West in Toronto called Food Benders, which is a local Toronto food company offering takeout meals, catering services, and wholesale supply of healthy and delicious prepared foods. On July 2nd, Food Benders issued the following statement. I want to address accusations of anti-Semitism regarding our social media and sidewalk sign. The first thing I will say is that I love Jewish people and they are welcome in my store. I've never said anything about Jewish people. I do not believe criticism of the Zionist political ideology, Israel, or the Greater Israel Project, or pointing out its racist, supremacist foundations amounts to criticism of the Jewish people or even Israeli citizens. She had earlier put up a sign, I believe, that said that Zionists were not allowed in her restaurant. I don't know how one could tell that someone was a Zionist. And this has become a big story in Toronto. Sue Ann Levy in the Toronto Sun. Bloor Street shop dishes out vitriolic anti-Zionist tropes. There's a graphic in the front window which says, I heart Gaza. The owner of a Bloor Street West catering company was under fire for posting vitriolic Instagram comments, including Zionists are not welcome in her shop and that they are Nazis, greedy and entitled, refused to back down when visited Friday. In fact, it would seem that the firestorm Kimberly Hawkins has created, most of it on social media, for her claims that Israel is a terrorist state that kills little babies. Yeah. After Hawkins permitted me to purchase a tiny $13 keto chicken and rapini salad, even though I told her I was a Zionist, a Jew, and a journalist from the Toronto Sun, she refused to comment on the recent controversy swirling around her. I don't really understand. I mean, so this Jewish woman goes to this restaurant, identifies herself as being Jewish and a Zionist, and the woman still serves her. We don't live in the Middle East. This is not our fight. I do not share the liberal sympathy for the Palestinians and their cause, but even so, it's not particularly relevant to us, or relevant at all, actually. It really isn't. Levy writes, she also indicated I was badgering her for an interview while two others screamed at me repeatedly using the word F. You're done here. You need to get the F out of here, calling me a hateful F more than once. Yeah, okay. Apparently someone from Hespera, Canada, is shocked by Food Bender's Instagram page. Oh, come on. I don't really think so. This sort of thing is entirely common now. Canadian universities have been taken over by people who hate the Jews. They know this. Oh, yeah. Wow. This is from the Mail. Nightmare in New York, how COVID-19, BLM protests, and a liberal mayor are turning the city into a no-go zone as murders skyrocket. Shops are looted and 500,000 middle-class residents flee. Flee to where, I wonder? The problem is that they are going to take their liberalism with them. The very things that, the very people who elected Bill de Blasio as mayor and agree with all this idiocy. Oh, well, things have gotten a little too hot for them. So now, what, they're going to move to Florida? Are they going to push Florida into the Democratic camp? I suppose if they move to Connecticut, they can't make that state any more left-wing than it is. Let's see a very dramatic lead from Carolyn Graham. 2 bullet-ridden bodies lay sprawled on blood-stained concrete steps. Alongside, relatives of the victims are wailing and collapsed to the ground. In another part of the city, a gang of youths used spray paint to disable security cameras before robbing a corner store. Later, video footage captures police officers sitting helplessly in their patrol car as a baying crowd hurls glass bottles at them. This is lawless New York, a city that was once America's glittering crown jewel, but which just risks descending into mob rule. Well, yeah, it's sort of off and on with New York City. By 1970, New York City was considered to be a hellhole, and a very large number of people left the city. Ford to New York City, drop dead, was the headline. Yes, figures released by the NYPD show that for the first 6 months of 2020, there were 176 murders, a 23% increase on the same period last year. Above, looting continues in Manhattan. Oh, and George Floyd. Yes, this is the George Floyd memorial looting. The number of shooting victims has gone up 51% to 616 this year, and thank God they are such terrible shots. It must be, I've always found graffiti to be distressing, exceedingly distressing, but imagine living in a city where everything is covered with graffiti. Yes, parts of Manhattan, famously the city that never sleeps, have begun to resemble a ghost town since 500,000 mostly wealthy middle-class residents fled when COVID-19 struck in March. New York State has suffered the highest death toll in America with more than 24,000 dead, nearly 10,000 more than the second hardest hit state, New Jersey. Yeah, how about that? Because both the mayors of both those states did something really stupid and criminal, which is to take people who'd been infected and put them into nursing homes, killing thousands of people. The Broadway Theater District sits in darkness, unlikely to open before next year, or perhaps never open again. I'm seeing more and more of these people wearing these shields, which are actually, perspex, plastic, whatever you call it, coming right down to here. I guess, is that really necessary? Joel Kotkin, a leading expert on urban trends and a native New Yorker who now lives in California, told the Mail, "This is an unprecedented crisis, the likes of which New York has never faced. When 9/11 happened, it was a major disruption, but the country and the world rallied in support, and there was a great sense of solidarity." Kotkin says under Mayor de Blasio, conditions were perfect for the pandemic to flourish. The subway was filthy. There was a huge disparity in wealth. The rich immediately fled to homes in the country or by the beach. Millennials went home to their parents. That left poor people and immigrants living in incredibly crowded conditions with high levels of poverty and multiple generations in one household. Add to that the BLM riots, and the protests in New York was a perfect storm of everything that could go wrong and did. Significantly, Kotkin believes that people being able to work from home will dramatically change the nature of life in New York forever. A city which is perceived as dangerous and dirty doesn't hold any appeal. It makes sense to locate to suburban regions and smaller towns that are generally safer, cleaner, and less expensive. Well, if all the rich and the middle class people live, where are the tax revenues going to come from? Oh, so where are they going? Ooh, Austin, Texas, not a surprise. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, okay. So they're going to wreck that city? Are they? The Mail is lots of great photographs. Portland and Seattle, ungovernable. Police declare a riot twice on July 4th in Portland, while protesters risk 10 years in jail for throwing a Columbus statue into Baltimore Harbor hours after the president called them Nazis. The mayor of Baltimore was quite forthright about this. saying that he had no intention of ordering the police to do their job. Police were reportedly at the scene but did not intervene, as a spokesperson for Baltimore Mayor Bernard Young explained that protecting statues was not a priority for the police department, who were more focused on homicides and other crimes. Oh, is the Baltimore police stopping people from being killed? I highly doubt it. No, it's just property. No one cares about property. That's pretty much the story of human history, that nobody cares about property and that no one would, murder for property, or no one would invade other countries for their stuff. The city was dedicated in 1984 by former Mayor William Schaefer and President Ronald Reagan. It gives you an idea just how much things have changed in Baltimore in only, 36 years. For police officers in Baltimore who, like I don't know that there's a single one of these stories that doesn't have at least one error every paragraph. Baltimore, who, like many other departments, are facing increasing scrutiny, reprimanding civilians over statues is not at the forefront of their agenda. What is their agenda? One wonders. Oh, Jim Kunstler seems to be getting fed up with liberals, totally fed up with them, angry, enraged even. He writes this morning, way back in the 1950s, the popular euphemism to describe Black children struggling in poverty was underprivileged. The elegant trope guided the nascent social services industry that reached full flower a few years later in Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty, a cause as lost, it turns out, as the war in Vietnam. The wonder is that it took 70 years for the race and gender faculty to come up with the corollary notion that white folks must be excessively privileged and must be punished for their broken promise to bestow more privilege upon those lacking it. And so, in the paroxysms of early summer 2020, with COVID-19 raging worldwide and the floor dropping from underneath our shuck and jive economy, and the climate doing whatever it's doing, Chuck and Nancy led their privileged minions in a ceremony of penance, taking their knees with shoulders draped in kente shawls of atonement, signifying what exactly? That they were surrendering their privilege? Cue laugh track. What it really signified was how plumb out of ideas they are for correcting this diabolical injustice. Of course, the animating principle of the woke inquisition is that nobody is forgiven for anything. Your request for absolution is only proof of your wickedness, requiring further punishment. So what was to be done then? Well, nothing. Moiling mobs of the underprivileged were granted permission to go shopping after hours on Rodeo Drive, Midtown Fifth Avenue, and other upscale zip codes around the country, accompanied by privileged white allies, piously working out their own Ivy League bad karma. When there was no more swag left to loot, the mob was invited to stage an orgy of statue toppling. Nobody interfered with that tantrum, thinking perhaps that losing a few public monuments was a small price to pay for preventing some more ghastly blood in the streets scenario. The police were reduced to acting as spectators while awaiting wholesale dismissal from their jobs and enduring the censorious opprobrium of their elected overseers' pledge to defunding law enforcement. The nation managed to get through its shameful 4th of July birthday without the demolition of Mount Rushmore or the torching of Mount Vernon. But yes, and I can hardly believe this. I've had it confirmed to several sources that it is true, but again, I can hardly believe it. The Sunday following, a virtual army of Black former military personnel, so they said, armed with assault rifles and clad in combat drag, marched into Georgia's Stone Mountain Park, where a colossal bas-relief sculpture stands carved into the rock wall, depicting that trinity of Confederate arch-fiends, Robert E. Lee, Jefferson Davis, and Stonewall Jackson. The militia styled itself as the, wait for it, once again, I'm not making this up, the Not Fucking Around Coalition, NFAC. Its leader, name of Grandmaster J, declared every descendant of slavery a political prisoner and proposed to found a new all-black nation. We'll take Texas, GMJ averred. They affected to be met by an opposing army of white supremacists, but none showed up. Perhaps the enemy was not informed ahead of time. The marchers pretended to be disappointed. "We here! Where the fuck you at?" their leader asked. Echo answered. Battle of Stone Mountain averted. Now what? What's next in the escalating 2020 war of, so far, symbols? The resurgence of COVID-19 has prompted more shutdowns, meaning resumed job layoffs, business destruction, and anxious, seething, sweltering boredom for those not privileged to be working from home. The current round of government payments is about over two, and millions may be facing eviction, mortgage default, car repo, and other personal catastrophes. Another round of $600 bonuses will not avail to solve those problems, and when it's spent on the imperative need for food, then what? Well, the political conventions, personally, and what with the virus rampant, I doubt they will be held in the traditional way. The great civic center jamborees of shoulder rubbing, sign waving, and conga dancing, meaning that even more than ever before, these extravaganzas will be reduced to mere TV shows that nobody will watch. Could be a boon to the phantom candidacy of Joe Biden, who would remain coolly stashed away in his basement sepulcher, presented to the electorate as a hologram. Then again, an entirely offstage convention could invite backstage intrigue on the part of those unconvinced that a holographic president will do in this year of pending social and economic collapse. Hillary to the rescue, I'd say. The embattled and sore beset Donald Trump looks like he's on the ropes. It's hard to say if he even comprehends the gravity of this blossoming long emergency or fourth turning crisis. He's fought off every effort to overthrow him by the deep state pygmies of sedition, but the collapse of an empire is more like a battle against fate itself. Like him or not, you know, have to feel for someone in such a monumental struggle. Yes. What is NFAC, and does it really want Texas as a black ethno-state? This is from Meow, something like that. Written by Namrata Tripathi. For a white supremacist media, there seems to be an awful lot of non-whites working there. Shortly after a black militia group that calls itself the Not Fucking Around Coalition made an appearance in Stone Mountain, Georgia, a video of their Grand Master became viral, asking for a black nation. With the recent emergence of the militia group amidst the rampant Black Lives Matter protests in the country, there's been an increased intrigue about the group. What is NFAC? Although the group appears secretive about its origins, it comprises armed black ex-military shooters seemingly seeking a black state in the U.S. The NFAC has also distanced itself from the peaceful Black Lives Matter protests. Oh, peaceful, is that what they were? Stating that they believe in an eye for an eye approach. Well, yeah, if you're looking for the eye approach, you got what you wanted. Like on, I don't know, January the 15th of every year. Who's thumping whom? NFAC was previously seen during a George Floyd protest in Minneapolis, where they were reportedly protecting black-owned businesses amid the unrest in May. I mentioned before that I thought that, was it 1974, the Symbionese Liberation Army, and their leader was Donald DeFreeze, who called himself General Field Marshal Cinque or something. I thought that was the craziest thing that I'd ever seen. This may be crazier. Let's see. Grandmaster J says the solution is very simple. We follow the Declaration of Liberation, declaring every African American descendant of slavery a political prisoner here in the United States who were affected by the Portuguese slave trade. And then after that, the United States has a choice: either carve us a piece of land out here, we will take Texas and let us do our own thing, or don't stop us when we exit this body here and go somewhere where they would give us our own land to build our own nation. I am the official Grandmaster J. I created the NFAC, he declares. When he is asked how long his organization has been in existence, he says, we don't give that information out. Just that, we'll tell you this, we're all ex-military, we're all very disciplined, we're all expert shooters. Yeah. You see, this isn't going to work. Even assuming that Texas was given over to Grandmaster Jay and his acolytes, there would be a large number of black people in the United States, presumably a very firm majority who would have no desire to live in a black-led ethno-state. I mean, prove me wrong. Newsweek also covers this story. Yes, Stone Mountain, massive 9-story quartz sculpting. It really is very impressive. And good luck. Good luck destroying that. Of course, talking about destroying Mount Rushmore. Oh, by the way, these black men dressed in black, many of whom wearing masks, or almost all of them wearing masks, they were stopping cars and demanding reparations. That's armed robbery, isn't it? Let's see. Okay. One of the protesters there said, I don't see no white militia. The Boogie or Boogaloo Boys, who are these people? Have they even been proved to exist? The 3%ers and all the rest of those scared ass rednecks. We here, where the fuck you at? We're in your house. Okay. Joe Biden may be hiding in a basement, but he has big plans for America. He would transform America if elected president. We're going to beat Donald Trump, and when we do, we won't just rebuild this nation, we'll transform it. Yeah. How? Wasn't it plenty transformed when Obama was president? If it wasn't, what was Obama doing for 8 years? What was he doing? Has Trump changed the United States so much that it must be transformed again after the great transformation of the sainted Obama? Yeah, Trump is way behind in the polls, but this is something that's happened to Republicans many times. For instance, George W. Bush, who was at one point, not George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush. It was like 16 points behind Dukakis. There's no race yet because the Democrats haven't nominated a candidate. Of course, I don't know, they may be cleverer than I'd imagined them to be. They may decide that they're not going to run a campaign at all. They're simply not. That every so often, Joe Biden will make some sort of bumbling statement from his basement and will be told that it is rude, false, possibly ageist, to make fun of his obvious mental infirmity. I think they actually may go that direction. Let's have another look at the chat here. Oh, we got the film noir thing going on here again. Let's see. Okay. Related, the Boogaloos. Quachalango says, worst part of this Boogaloo stuff is making me feel guilty, but actually looking up Boogaloo 9 music. I don't, yeah, who are these people? Metal Mike says, not before he transforms his tub into a walk-in. William Hicks, Grandmaster Jay, a disc jockey with a gun, an impossible dream. Mike F. says, Biden at one point warns that Trump is changing America's soul. Next vows that he'll transform America. Aslan says Boogaloo was popular in Puerto Rico way back then. Yes, Biden says that he was his own husband. He seems to have a lot of trouble distinguishing in public between his wife and himself. Jonathan Pohl says the Boogaloo is a figment of the FBI's imagination. Kamala Harris. We're hearing an awful lot about Kamala Harris. Yeah, I worry more about Susan Rice because that woman wants a war. She wants a war with Russia. She'd be determined to get it too. Seriously, if Susan Rice became vice president, she would obviously quickly become president, and then that Armageddon would be looming. Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo. Yeah, the 2 colon Electric Boogaloo. That has been a meme even before there were memes. I just can't wait for the American media or the Canadian media to start asking Kamala Harris about growing up in Montreal, Quebec. Of course, I'm joking. They're never going to ask about that. They are never going to ask about that. Don from Beyond says, haha, my younger son is a professional poker player. The local poker room recently reopened. I asked him about reading people's expressions while they're masked. Yeah. Hello, Glib Medley. Greetings to you as well. Aslan, or suddenly Biden gets fitted with earpiece where he parrots whatever the handlers say. It is not that easy. It's not as easy as it may sound to have someone talking into your ear and then have to deal with someone or groups of other people who are also speaking to you. You know, that's why TV anchors, that's why these meat puppets earn the big bucks, because it's hard to pull this off successfully. Donald Robinson says, I don't think Texas wants to be a black ethno-state. Well, I don't know. The people in Austin may be up for it, but I don't think the Hispanics would be. I agree. No debate. Kamala gets in after 1 month due to Andropov-style exit. Again, she's another one of these black people in the United States who has no connection to American slavery, just like Colin Kaepernick. African, you know? Chad Chadson says, I barbecued with 3 percenters, Oath Keepers, and Proud Boys over the weekend. They got quite a chuckle out of that video. KMG's friend Jim Goad lives near Stone Mountain, believe. Yeah, good one. Good one there. Don from Beyond says, I've applied for unemployment. I can't be a DoorDash driver anymore if they try to make me wear a face mask. Let's talk about Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz, because they have been all over the news. Of course, they are suing Associated Newspapers, aka the Daily Mail. Very serious error. You know, lots of people have just got, their lives just got exploded after they initiated defamation suits. I suppose Oscar Wilde is the most famous, but there's also David Irving and Jeffrey Archer. Many such cases. How are Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz filling their days in a 12-bathroom Hollywood mansion 6 months after making a break for freedom? They are keenly speaking out against racial injustice, but seem obsessed with what they left behind. Oh yes, this the regular videos. Have you seen any of these videos? That Prince Harry, they're shoddily done. They're lower quality than the video that you're watching from me now. And Harry is appearing against a bare gray background. It looks like an ISIS snuff video. The Daily Mail insists on showing me pictures of Chrissy Teigen. Yes, please, let's get rid of this. And there's a picture of the 8-bedroom, 12-bathroom Tuscan-style villa, which sits on the top of a hill in the exclusive Beverly Ridge Estates gated community, which is owned by Tyler Perry. It's, what can I say? It's enormous, this place. It's absolutely enormous. Trapped in their vast Los Angeles mansion by coronavirus, their new lives on pause, The couple issue regular reminders to the British people of their charitable concerns, such as saying how humbled they are by the work of an organization that has been delivering food to people during the lockdown, or Harry apologizing for not doing enough to combat racism that is endemic in society. Last week, we saw Meghan's explosive accusations over the way she feels she was treated by courtiers and staff who served the family into which she married. The former actress claims she was left unprotected while pregnant with Archie. Yes, they actually named their kid Archie. That her mental health suffered. Oh dear. And she was prohibited from defending herself. With remarkable chutzpah, too, she claims their wedding was a £1 billion money spinner for the UK, and that public money spent on her was relatively nominal. Perhaps the £2.4 million of taxpayers' cash blown on renovating Frogmore Cottage had slipped her mind, although they have promised to repay that eventually. And there's a... Let's see, Meghan's speech. She looks such a noble young woman. Yes, they have postponed the launch of their charity Archwell or Archiewell, or no one knows what it means or what it is supposed to do. Their focus was to be on wellness, which would include mental health, the environment, and female empowerment. No one else is doing that. Harry had also planned to advance his rather amorphous plans for sustainable tourism through Travelist, an organization established with partners such as Visa, TripAdvisor, and Booking.com to encourage holidaymakers to travel in a more environmentally friendly way. The fact that Harry has taken at least 7 international trips by polluting private jet in the past year appears to not have made it onto the slick new website. What do they do? What are the stories that Harry is getting plastered every day with the singer Adele? They're apparently old friends. They both like a drop. Adele, of course, has lost all of this weight, 60, 80 pounds or whatever. But I read concerns are that she's drinking so much that she might be gaining back that weight. A California source observed there is a big risk with their alignment with the Stop Hate for Profit pressure group. Harry and Meghan want to make their money through public speaking, yet it is the big businesses and tech giants of Silicon Valley who will pay the big bucks to hear them speak. Is it really so sensible for them to berate them before they've even started? Have they torpedoed themselves before they've launched themselves on the speaker circuit? There's a website which I find quite amusing. It's called harrymarkle.wordpress.com. What do they call her? MM, the feckless freeloader. Harry hijinks the Diana Award with the Harkle agenda. The desperate, sweaty stench of the Sussexes. Another PR push for the Harkle show. Prince Harry seems to be getting feebler and stupider looking with each possible day. Bandwagon biographers and the Sussex desperate deflection, the hustle of the Harkle hoaxers, plagiarism and the spinning of Sussex PR fibs. The Archwell trademark saga story, not an exclusive, continues again. What's it supposed to mean? What's it for? Oh, now that they just can't help themselves. Prince Harry risks angering the Queen by saying the Commonwealth must acknowledge past wrongs, even if it's uncomfortable, an apparent criticism of British Empire during call with Meghan to young leaders. I rather suspect that Prince Harry barely knows what the Commonwealth is. Very few people seem to know what it is. It is rather sad continuation of the British Empire, but includes a great number of countries which are in fact republics where the Queen has no role, and so it is absolutely pointless. Let's see. The wit and wisdom of Harry. Quote, When you look across the Commonwealth, there is no way that we can move forward unless we acknowledge the past. So many people have done such an incredible job of acknowledging the past and trying to right those wrongs, but I think we all acknowledge that there is so much more to do. Nothing. Zero. Absolutely meaningless. Perhaps Britain should, free all the colonies. What, they already did that decades ago? What more could they possibly do? One wonders. I'm not an admirer of Queen Elizabeth II. She has presided over the greatest decline in English history. I mean, say after the Norman invasion, all right? Her children, this has not worked out very well, except for perhaps Edward. They've all been divorced at least once, sometimes several times. They just seem an unpleasant and bumbling lot. But I don't know if they are trying to have the monarchy, abolished again as it was under the Charles II. They seem to be doing an outstanding job of this. This is a Telegraph exclusive. When Bill Clinton flew into London in September 2002, doors naturally flew open for him. He had stepped down as president of the United States after 2 terms only the year before and was on his way to address the Labour Party conference. Among the doors that opened were those to Buckingham Palace when the Duke of York invited him to tour the Queen's London home. At the time, no one could imagine the visit would come back to haunt those taking part. But it has, following the Telegraph's discovery of this astonishing photograph of Ghislaine Maxwell, first printed on Saturday, sitting on the ornate seat the Queen used for her coronation in 1953, in breach of all protocol. Next to her is Clinton's friend Kevin Spacey, then Hollywood royalty, and shortly to become artistic director of the Old Vic, and shortly to be accused of the sexual molestation of children. I know that Prince Andrew is a stupid man, a deeply stupid man, but how stupid would one have to be in order to bring Maxwell and Kevin Spacey into a throne room and make mocking photographs? Everything's being canceled now, except for these pictures of Chrissy Teigen. Ugh. But Hamilton apparently is being canceled, and I couldn't be happier. This is the hit musical that everyone in America wants to see or has already seen. Is there one song from this hit musical that people know, that people can, sing along to, hum along to? Because it's a weird thing, because I keep hearing about Hamilton, or hearing about it for years. Where are all the hit tunes? Because that's what you expect from a hit musical, is hit tunes, right? Cancel Hamilton sweeps the internet with calls for the musical to be axed after its debut on Disney Plus over criticism of the founding father for his role in the slave trade. Alexander Hamilton traded slaves but did not own any himself. He managed slave sales for his wife's family and also did accounting for a Caribbean trading company that engaged in the slave trade. Lin-Manuel Miranda last month issued an apology to fans of Hamilton for the Broadway show's failure to publicly denounce systemic racism sooner. It's not enough for it to be a Broadway show. It has to be some sort of political entity, a corporate entity as well, that has its own thoughts on things that are going on in the world. The musical, created by Lin-Manuel Miranda, portrays Hamilton as a young, scrappy, and hungry immigrant, and someone who was passionate about the abolition of slavery. Alexander Hamilton was not an immigrant to the United States. He was not. He was a settler. He was a Scottish settler. He was not a black man. In fact, that slur comes from John Adams, who hated Hamilton with a passion. And there's a picture. There's a picture of all these black people who are supposedly founding fathers or whatever. They all everyone seems to be crying in these pictures for some reason. The Hamilton musical, which won 11 Tonys for its Broadway run and has grossed $1 billion worldwide, cast many non-white actors in roles as historical white figures. I thought that was sinful. Absolutely sinful. But the production glosses over the issue of slavery, making few references about the profits that some founding fathers made from it. Ajamu Baraka, an international human rights activist, organizer, political analyst, wrote, "The play and now movie Hamilton is racist buffoonery, oh dear, and revisionist history meant to make liberal white folks feel good about their collaboration with the colonial project known as the U.S. and its racist imperialist project abroad. Miranda should concentrate on freeing Puerto Rico." That's a good idea. That is a good idea. How is Hamilton not canceled? Alexander Hamilton owned and traded slaves. I think we need to cancel Hamilton, well, wrote one Twitter user. Some of the tweets appear to be tongue-in-cheek and mocking of cancel culture, which has seen shows and movies removed from streaming sites for their depiction of racism. I see that an episode of Community, the famous first Dungeons and Dragons episode, has been removed because Ken Jeong appears wearing black makeup. He is not attempting to look like a black man. He is attempting to look like, I don't know, an elf or some such thing. And no one seeing this would confuse him with a black person. But we can't have these people upset in the slightest. Episodes of TV shows, including Scrubs, Golden Girls, and 30 Rock, have been pulled from online platforms for their portrayal of blackface. Once again, folks, buy the DVDs while you still can. Because make no mistake, streaming, you're going to get to be able to watch what they want you to watch, and they do not want to be embarrassed by someone saying that this is racist. Oh, but wait, others have sprung to defend show creator Miranda. To those of you using Cancel Hamilton, you need to learn to separate fact from fiction. Hamilton is a goddamn Broadway musical, not a history lesson. To those of you trying to cancel Lynn, give me one reason why. Your reasoning is that he made the founding fathers look like good people. It's basic American history that the founding fathers were not good people. I thought he was going in a different direction. 2 years ago, you wouldn't shut up about the musical. Now you want to cancel it? Yeah, you guys are dumb asses. In an interview with NPR last week, Miranda admitted the show does not deal with the issue of slavery in a way that it deserves. Yeah, okay. Slavery. When did that end in the United States? Like 1978 or something like that? One gets that impression. Oh, the Washington Post. It seems to be angry children, angry woke children who write for the Post now. There is a piece that appeared over the weekend, which seems to, not enough censoring is being done. When offensive TV shows get pulled, problematic books are, problematic books. Let's go after those problematic books. And this man, what is his name? Ron Charles? He's terrible. He's just terrible. Okay, so he writes about Shakespeare's Othello. Of course, he's a Moor. This assumption that the Moor is a black man, I don't think that it's warranted, frankly. Ludovico Sforza, the 15th century. His enemies called him Ludovico il Moro, meaning Ludovico the Black, because he was so dusky in temperament, and rude things were said about his parentage. Um, so black people own Othello now. This isn't something that this fellow actually wrote. By the end of a ferocious week, the bard would withdraw his play, begin a listening tour, and issue a statement expressing deep regret for the pain he has caused by appropriating the experience of a Moor. Elsewhere in the piece, he moans about the unbearable whiteness of, who was this? Jane Austen. Yes. This is probably, you know how it works, right? There's the provocation, and then there's the reaction, and then there's the reaction to that. This is from Fox News. The Washington Post raised eyebrows over the 4th of July weekend after tweeting about problematic books that could be swept up in the cultural shift following the death of George Floyd. For the past several weeks, many television shows and films have been the subject of re-examination. Shows like Cops and Live PD have been canceled. Again, Live PD was the most popular show on cable TV. Sitcom episodes that feature blackface have been pulled, and Gone with the Wind was temporarily removed from the HBO Max library. In a piece published on Friday, Charles invokes famous literature that may be seized upon in the national dialogue, like Othello, Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. While he opposed the tolerance of, quote, plainly racist books, unquote, Charles decried cancel culture as the anecdote to address famous novels with nuanced depictions of race. And who's going to determine whether they are nuanced as well? Yeah, not Colin Kaepernick. Oh, Jamel Hill to produce ESPN docuseries about Colin Kaepernick as part of his Disney deal. Can't get enough of that guy and his burst mattress hair. Oh, yes, a lot of people are having fun with the Washington Post. This is again from Fox News. It was roasted on social media over the weekend for publishing an op-ed calling for a college partially named after George Washington to change its name because he perpetrated racial terror without ever acknowledging the opinion was printed in a newspaper named after, well, George Washington. Washington and Lee University School of Law assistant professor Brandon Hasbrook penned the op-ed headline, "Both namesakes of Washington and Lee University perpetrated racial terror. The school should be renamed." Yeah. Hasbrook then explained that Lee was a commander of the Confederate Army. Okay. I guess that is a shock to people. Some people are shocked by the suggestion that Washington's name is offensive. Yes, Washington was the country's first president after leading the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, but he enslaved more than 300 black people. He ordered one whipped for walking on his lawn. The author never mentioned the name of the newspaper he was writing for. I don't know. That's a mistake that a lot of people could make. You stop, it's the Washington Post. You don't stop to think what it's named for, I guess. But they are really going after George Washington. And you will recall, 6 months ago or so, that was an outrageous suggestion that these people would be going after George Washington. No. Washington is safe. Washington and Jefferson are safe. The Z-Man has a amusing piece, a parody of a woman called Nicole Hannah-Jones. Isn't she the same as Ida Bay Wells with her wine-colored hair? This is Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project, creator of Pulitzer Prize winner, being interviewed by a typical white person. Thank you for agreeing to begin this dialogue, having read your latest column on reparations. We, and by we, I mean white people, have decided that it is time to think about reparations. While we can in no way accept the claim that modern whites owe modern blacks anything for the alleged crimes of our ancestors, in the furtherance of peace between the races, we are open to discussing reparations. And then they get into the question of whether, this should be just about whites and blacks. whether any other groups should be involved here. Yes, from Nicole, it's been more than 150 years since the white planter class last called up the slave patrols and deputized every white citizen to stop, question, and subdue any black person who came across their paths en route to control and surveil a population who refused to submit to their enslavement. It's been 150 years since white Americans could enforce slave laws. Okay, I got it. I read the piece a few times. In fact, if all you're going to do here is recite from the list of grievances, then we're wasting our time. And then, how much? I've read Ta-Nehisi Coates on the subject of reparations. What seems to be missing is the dollar figure. As I've said in my piece, generations of white violence against black bodies has to be addressed. There can be no peace until white people accept what they owe to black people. Right, I'll stipulate that. In fact, without qualification, I'll stipulate to all of the claims in your work. What I'm here to discuss is reparations. What number do we put on the check to make black people whole? What is the debt you expect us to pay? As I said in my piece, until white people atone for their crimes against black people and pay their debt, hold up. I just said we will stipulate to all of that. Now, I don't know what you mean by stipulate, but white people need to accept their debt to black people, as I wrote in my piece. Sorry to cut you off again, but that's what stipulate means. We agree to all the claims made in your work and in the work of others. We're not here to debate it or hear another recitation of it. We're here to negotiate the check. Check? Yes, the check. We are prepared to write every descendant of slaves, even those of mixed race, a check. Will pay the debt you feel you are owed. I don't think a check can cover the pain of 150 years of suffering. Okay, then what else do you want? Like a black homeland, a ride to the airport? What? Tell me what we have to do to close the books on this. And of course, the joke is that there's no closing the books on this. That reparations may be paid, but it's not going to make any difference because it's never enough. And the systemic racism continues. There's a piece on Forge and Anvil by Laramie Hirsch, and it's called From Here It Will Get Very Violent. I just want to make it clear right from the very beginning that I do not in any way endorse violence in the current situation. And he talks about the fireworks of July the 4th. And I said to myself, this sort of feels like this year's riots. And indeed, mobs certainly were rampant across the United States this July 4th. As the citizenry continued to celebrate the American mythos, perhaps for one last year, armies of the Marxists ran rampant in leftist strongholds. Many people are beginning to get injured and or killed. Any public expression of our heritage and culture is being destroyed, and the impulsive are arming in a serious way that they may kill. I speak here of an incident in Georgia in which a militant group known as NFAC marched through the streets in formation fully armed, harassing white people as they move forward. And he talks about some recent cosmological developments. Last night, as the moon eclipsed for a brief period, crossing the penumbra of the earth, its brightness faded. The life was leaving it. The lamp of Our Lady dimmed as the spirit of our nation dims, and just as America has never been furthest from God, so too was it that on our national holiday, the earth was furthest from the sun, also known as the lamp of our Lord. Today, this Independence Day weekend will end as a kind of trinity manifests itself in the sky. The moon whose spirit faded on America's day will be accompanied by the father and son of the gods, Jupiter and Saturn. Thus we are assured once more from the signs in heaven that God's eye is on us in this time. But moving on from this cosmic marvel that most people will overlook, we are faced with the reality of this period. The American spirit is fading, charity grows cold, blood is in the water, and these sharks smell it. The enemies of American citizens now realize, after much beta testing, that they can get away with more than they thought they could. They now know that, sure, perhaps their legal process may find them guilty later on. However, in the short term, they can do much damage, injury, and murder, and nothing can stop them. Perhaps these people will be sent to jail, or maybe they will go to prison later. Yet these secret armies are impulsive and emotional. Do they really care if their reputation is ruined in American society, seeing as how much they hate American society. Our civic nationalist president, God bless him, has finally begun to recognize this cultural and spiritual conflict that is erupting on American soil. And Mount Rushmore, this Independence Day weekend, he acknowledged that we are in a war. Quote, "There's a growing danger that threatens every blessing our ancestors fought so hard for, struggled they bled to secure. Our nation is witnessing a merciless campaign to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children. Angry mobs are trying to tear down statues of our founders, deface our most sacred memorials, and unleash a wave of violent crime in our cities. Many of these people have no idea why they're doing this, but some know what they're doing. They think the American people are weak and soft and submissive. This Independence Day punctuates the American story. It is a benchmark. This is a point in which we have to realize that the time for conversation is over. If these people wanted to talk and work things out, they would have by now. They do not want to reason. They do not want to dialogue. They openly tell us that they want to violently overthrow us, which means injuring, destroying, and killing us. America is at war. One side is fighting that war, and the other side is going to work. You have about 1 year, maybe 2, to finish your arsenal, purchase your ammunition, purchase your armor and your glass, exercise, reduce your body fat, and get used to cardiovascular activity, learn how to take a punch, learn to brawl, and practice drills with the community that you should have formed by now. There will be no reconciliation, there will be no peace, there will be no understanding, no charity, no timeouts. They do not care about subtlety, nuance, or distinctions. They will not show mercy. They will heckle, scorn, laugh, and deride you. This is what the demons do to sinners in hell. This is what the children of Satan do on earth. And this is what the secret armies of the Marxists are going to do to everyone trying to mind their own business in the coming years. You do not have a decade. It is starting now. Adjust your thinking, learn to cope with this, and hold fast to God." Laramie Hirsch might be right, but I'll tell you something about the left and the resistance. Let's go back to the civil rights movement, and we can incorporate in that. After Stonewall, gay rights. We can talk about feminism. We can talk about transsexual rights. It's all been so terribly easy for them. Yes, some of them had fire hoses, set on them in the 1960s. It didn't take very long for America to be turned upside down, for America to be altered almost beyond recognition. These people are used to putting in a little bit of effort, and then everyone says, "Oh, your cause is just so just. We will give you everything that you like. And by the way, feel free to come back to ask for more. Because whatever you like, we'll give it to you. We'll give it to you." And so I don't think that these people are going to respond very well to opposition, to real opposition. I mean, you've all seen the footage. You have these women, teenage girls or women in their 20s, and they bring their heads right up to police officers, and they scream. They scream at the top of their lungs. They scream obscenities and insults at the police officers, and they're not even imagining for a moment that it would be the work of a couple of seconds for that police officer to knock out all their teeth with a rifle butt, because they're just supposed to take it. And so if there is a reaction, I'll be curious how many of them rush off immediately with the tail between their legs. Speaking of tail between one's legs, I saw a bunch of people on the weekend who were very excited by a picture of Mike Trout wearing a mask. Mike Trout is a baseball player. He plays for the Los Angeles Angels, and he's one of the best players in the game. He earns, $32 million a year? He is an expecting father, but he says he still hasn't decided whether to play Major League Baseball this season, reflecting the tough personal choices being made around the country. A number of these baseball players have talked about their family. Well, this is a very short baseball season we're talking about. 60 games? They've already had, 3 or 4 months with their family? I would have thought that a lot of them would be looking for a little diversion. But this is a story from Axios. Sports returns stalked by coronavirus. And rather like the teachers, it appears a lot of these athletes, they like the pay, they like the fame, they don't like the work so much. Seeing Mike Trout wearing a mask outdoors is absolutely preposterous. There's no possible use that this mask could serve. But how are they going to do this in baseball? As baseball spring training began in summer, players stayed 6 feet apart. Does that mean every time a ball is hit between the center fielder and the right fielder, or the center fielder and the left fielder, or perhaps the center fielder and the second baseman, or the shortstop, that they're just going to run? No, can't cross that 6 feet. They'll just drop in. It'd be hilarious. Just all these little blue pits again and again and again and again. How about tagging people out? How is that going to work, by the way? How is that, what about close plays at first base? You get a lot of those. Perhaps they can, come up with a path for the hitter, which is, sealed off from the rest of the stadium. David Price, who is also being paid over $30 million a year, is not going to play. Not going to play. I wonder how the fans are going to react to this. Oh, it gets absolutely worse. Okay. Virtually no staff members on the field. Clubhouse attendants cleaned balls with disinfectant after use, and masked reporters watched from the empty stand. 31 players and 7 staff tested positive for COVID-19, an encouraging low percentage, 1.2%. 19 teams had at least one player test positive. The big picture: the surging pandemic has cast a shadow over once optimistic plans at all levels. Florida shattered its daily coronavirus infections record on Saturday. Major League Soccer? Who cares? It's the second spike, so no sports. Well, if these professional leagues decide to cave in, they might find that there's not going to be much of their business left after this year. And I have to say that I would think that most baseball fans don't look kindly upon people being paid over $30 million a year. And, oh no, says David Price, I don't want to be up there on the pitching mound, all those feet away from the, 60 feet, 6 inches away from the batter. Oh, I don't know. Suppose he has a really hard cough. I could get infected. That's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Let's go back to the chat here. Visionary Companion says some of the fashions promoted by the Rick Owens types could easily be tweaked a bit and become burkas. Rick Owens. Aslan, reading people is essential for survival. These diapers make it nearly impossible. Metal Mike says the Dems will never allow the debates to happen, not with Biden as the candidate. I don't know. I've seen a lot of writing on this, and these candidates who come in with low expectations, all they have to do is to meet the low expectations. Because you know what the media is going to say? They're going to say, well, Joe Biden didn't, pull down his pants and start urinating against the camera, right? He didn't confuse the moderator of the debate with his mother repeatedly, or things like that, right? So he did a great job. Let's see. Okay. Trump will devour him in a debate. They know this. Again, I'm not so sure. Hillary was thought to be a sharp political operator, a woman you wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of. Jean Chrétien, he benefited from this his entire political career in Canada. And it was put to Canadians in the, 93 election that you were not allowed to criticize him for his obvious thuggishness. And Biden is almost there. He's almost there. The Boogaloo is a figment of the FBI's imagination, says Jonathan Pohl. Yeah, again, I hear this name. What is it? Really? Is it really supposed to be something? Okay, it's this nice joke there from Chogokin666. I'm not going to repeat it on the air. I like how you say diapers, KMG, because it implies... Okay. All right. Aslan says, I like Muammar Gaddafi's nomad tent style. Okay, so we've talked about the scaredy cat superstars. They opened the pubs in Britain over the weekend after 100 days, and you just don't have to imagine what happened. It's just a riot. Is what it is. It's a riot. Let's see. I found this quite interesting. This is to do with double counting. A reader in Toronto has been in touch. This is from Lockdown Skeptics by Toby Young. A reader in Toronto has been in touch to flag up a possible explanation for the rising case numbers in southern and southwestern U.S. states. Your recent post about double counting of Pillar 2 tests in Leicestershire got me thinking whether that could be a factor in the recent spike in cases in the U.S. So here's a link to, for example, Johns Hopkins data for Arizona. Among other things, the percentage of positive tests has been growing steadily and now stands at 25%. On the face of it, this is very alarming. It also doesn't seem to pass the sniff test, as hospitals should theoretically be overwhelmed. So here's an interesting disclaimer on the same page. Quote, when states report the number of COVID-19 tests performed, this should include the number of viral tests performed and the number of patients for which these tests were performed. Currently, states may not be distinguishing overall tests administered from the number of individuals who have been tested. This is an important limitation to the data that is available to track testing in the U.S., and states should work to address it, unquote. So they're as much as saying there's double counting going on. And if people who test positive get retested until they're negative, that would have the effect of artificially increasing both the number of cases and the percent positive. The same page also has an admonition for states not to include antibody tests in their reporting. So if some states are doing that, that could also help to explain the rise in cases and positive tests. Arizona is a more extreme example, but Texas and Florida are also showing strong increases in percent positive to 14 and 18% respectively. Another problem with the data, in addition to double counting, is that not all of it is up to date. This story in AZ Central has a rather bedwetting headline, but contains this gem towards the end. Arizonans have reported delays in getting tested and waits of as long as 3 weeks to get results. The daily cases reported are not all from the previous day's results. They could have been tests conducted weeks ago. I saw the suggestion today that there's no point in testing people. Oh, because, the test measures whether you're positive or negative at that moment. It doesn't measure what you are, I don't know, tomorrow. Well, of course, that's true of all tests, isn't it? No, I've got a very good idea why we've seen a paucity of tests. Because we will find out exactly how many people have been exposed to this virus and how relatively unlethal it in fact is. Got to keep the horror going, got to keep that terror going. Maybe if they can kill off the professional sports in the United States for this year, that, you have all the moaning arguments about that. And frankly, if Major League Baseball decides that it can't even risk 60 games, then obviously, Donald Trump shouldn't be going anywhere, talking to anyone. It's just too risky. What was it? The Lincoln Project was moaning about fireworks. Oh, can't they sound like communists. They absolutely sound like communists. No one is allowed to have a good time unless everyone is allowed to have a good time. And since not everyone is having a good time at any time, that means we all have to be miserable. Let's see, Jay Inslee announced the mask mandate for Washington State on June 23rd. Since then, our COVID cases have increased 4 times. Therefore, mask mandates cause COVID case spikes, such as the claim. Alex Berenson responds, requiring masks causes COVID spikes. Correlation, science, I say. Alex Berenson, he is not pleased with professional athletes. Just like me. Dear sweet Jesus, if I see one more article about professional athletes whining about their non-existent COVID risks, off the top of my head, I can think of 3 recently retired MLB players who died in plane or boat accidents or of overdoses since 2016. Oh yes, the passion of Mike Trout. It was Wednesday afternoon, and a veteran relief pitcher was in his car, driving to his team's home city with the intention of playing baseball in the midst of a pandemic. He spent the prior days in a remote location wondering whether he should drive north to his house or head west for his job. He chose the latter. First, I thought that wondering was wandering, because it would make him more of a religious figure. You can have Mike Trout out there wandering the Arizona desert, agonizing whether to accept his prorated $32 million salary. Berenson continues, 3 more than that will die from SARS-CoV-2, period. And maybe there are others I missed. The fact is that for wealthy pro athletes, boredom and its attendant thrill-seeking is a far greater risk than COVID. They should be grateful to be back at work, even if that work is play. And Coach Harry Ellis comments, Major League Baseball players stopped playing to fight in World War II. Now they're quitting because they're afraid of the air. Do your job. That is the message that Alex Berenson is pushing with regard to teachers. Again, why are they still getting paid if they're not teaching? Let's see, someone suggested just cut salaries by 40% for all that teaching that happens remotely. Teachers will beg districts to reopen, and he responded, why only 40%? Learning probably drops 60 to 80%. To be clear, many teachers are disgusted by these efforts, but they don't want to have to start public fights with their frightened colleagues and union leaders. And with regard to Arizona, which is the center of media hysteria for a while, COVID positive hospitalization / ICU visits are up, and yet the state's hospitals are overall emptier than they were 3 weeks ago. ICU units are about 5% more full. You read that, right? Apocalypse when? You have these diseases which are competing for attention and money. But I saw a particularly sad story. And I guess this is, again, particularly sad because June, Gay Pride Month, right? We didn't hear very much about Gay Pride Month. I suppose we heard about some Black homosexuals. But from the CBC, COVID pandemic threatens to set back battle against AIDS by 10 years. It's as if AIDS is, neglected in the corner of the wallflower saying, hey, over here, remember me, AIDS, scourge of humanity? We're all gonna die. Come on, come on. I just need a little more attention. I'm AIDS. Uh, uh, yeah. Bob Rae named Canadian ambassador to the United Nations. He just can't stop. He's he's like a shark. If he were to ever stop, that would be all over for him. Ontario is to end the discriminatory practice of academic streaming in grade 9. This deeply sinister man called Stephen Lecce, he's the Ontario Minister of Education. He called it systemic racist and discriminatory. Yes, apparently it's systemically discriminatory against stupid and lazy students. Streaming, in which students must choose to pursue either an academic or applied track when they begin high school, has been shown to disproportionately affect Black and low-income students when it comes to graduation rates and the chance of going to a post-secondary institution. That's at best a half-truth, because the applied track is much, much easier than the academic track. So I don't know how it could possibly affect graduation rates. Oh, and the chance of going to a post-secondary institution. Well, I guess if the goal is to have everyone go to a post-secondary institution, then there is no need for streaming. Like she said, it is clear that there is systemic discrimination built within the education system, whether it be streaming of racialized students. This guy's a conservative cabinet minister with a big C, and he speaks of racialized students. Suspensions overwhelmingly targeting Black and Indigenous kids, or the lack of merit-based diversity within our education workforce. What? What's he talking about? Is he saying there's no minority teachers and support personnel? He said students and teachers deserve an education system that is inclusive, accountable, and transparent, and one that by design is set up to fully and equally empower all children to achieve their potential. Well, what if some of these children don't have all that much potential? We already know how this is going to work. More will mean worse, as Kingsley Amis said. You will have students in academic classes for which they are not suited, they have no interest, and they are going to be troublesome. It's going to be increasingly difficult for the students who are interested in learning to learn anything in these classes. Let's see, 53% of Black students were in academic programs as compared to 81% of white and 80% of other so-called racialized students, meaning those who are part of other visible minorities. Conversely, 39% of Black students were enrolled in applied programs compared to 18% of other racialized groups and 16% of white students. Would it be so terrible for these people to learn a trade? Because those are real jobs that pay decent wages. They cannot be outsourced. People who have a trade, they tend to get along quite well in life, as opposed to, the baristas who spent 5 or 6 years to get their BA and find themselves, $65,000 in debt. No, but all must have prizes. All must get the same. Yes, Amy Cooper was charged. Did you see that? She is the Karen, or a Canadian, I suppose. Are they simultaneous? Amy Cooper faces charges after calling police on Black bird watcher. Yeah. The homosexual advocate. Yes, he's in the park because he's a bird watcher. Let's see. A white woman who called the police and falsely accused a Black man of threatening her life. Well, this is from the New York Times. And I said, in disputes like this, I tend to take the woman's side because, in this case, men are bigger than women, and they are typically more aggressive than women. And my reaction to this story was that, it had been not properly reported. Steve Saylor says, the gay blackmail Karen made a bizarre and not surprisingly frightening threat against the white woman. Listen, if you are going to do what you want, I'm going to do what I want, but you won't like it. And of course, we know that, yes, the Black Cooper's behavior carrying around dog treats to do something or other to other people's dogs reminds me of Tom Lehrer's song Poisoning Pigeons in the Park. But yeah, definitely got to prosecute this woman. But just, remember my advice. ABA, always be avoiding. Let's see. What brands do looters go for? This is again from Steve Saylor. Steve commenter Clifford Brown reminiscence about the recent looting of high-end shops in Soho and Lower Manhattan. I can't possibly pronounce this. Fjällräven is a Scandinavian hiking brand. Their backpacks have become ubiquitous in recent years. I am a fan of their hiking pants, which are decidedly unfashionable, but also virtually indestructible. When I watched the live stream of the looting of Soho, I took solace in the fact that the mob would not touch the Fjällräven store. I spoke with the manager of the store, and it turns out the looters did in fact break into the store, but basically did not take anything. Turns out utilitarian high-end Scandinavian hiking gear does not appeal to the looter demographic. Who would have guessed? I joked with the staff of the store there that the looters were likely not that into hiking. The staff, being PC automatons, brains froze and said, well, we really don't know if they like to hike or not. What a world. Every single person who has been shot in New York City this July, nearly 100 in total, has been a member of the minority community. Don't we refer to them as racialized now? And 97% of shooting victims in June were members of the city's minority communities. 50% of the shootings have taken place in just 10 precincts. Those communities are being overrun by a small percentage of gang members who have little regard for their own life and no regard for their community. The bloodshed isn't limited to New York City. Chicago's recent crime-fighting success has cratered, with a homicide rate that has risen 34% this year compared to last, for a total of 324 deaths. Over the last 28 days compared to last year, over the same period, homicides rose 83%, and Philadelphia's homicide rate is up 27%. A criminology professor, Peter Moscow, tweets, you'll see a lot of this in the coming years. 1, crime isn't going up. 2, crime is lower than it was in 1993. It's complicated. 4, who can say why? 5, society is to blame. And 6, well, we don't want to go back to the kind of policing that kept crime lower because policing is bad. And then Steve Saylor says, I would add number 7. And then finally, yeah, okay, crime is up since the racial reckoning, but you whites deserve to be robbed and beaten by thugs because Emmett Till. Megan Mertz used that word reckoning the other day when lecturing people about the Commonwealth, supremacy, etc., etc., etc. That is the word of, not just the week, the word of the month, reckoning. And I am not going to believe for a second that these things are not planned. No. That we heard about journalist all those years ago, and something like journalist, it still exists. You know, I know that the people in journalism, they get to be pretty good at mimesis, but not that good. Not that good. Let's talk about what's coming up on the show this week. And hang on. Sorry about that. Let me scroll to the top. All That Jazz by Bob Fosse. As I mentioned before, I do not like musical theater, but I love this film because it is so full of life. On July the 16th, The Searchers by John Ford from 1956. Buy this film before it is banned. All right. On July 23rd, oh, I see we've got some William Peter Blatty, John Boorman action going here because, of course, John Boorman directed Exorcist 2, starring Richard Burton. Boorman thought that Richard Burton was a bad actor, which he was. Exorcist 2 is considered one of the worst movies of all time. I've never really seen it, but I have seen The Ninth Configuration, which Blatty directed in 1980. It's a strange and delightful film. Speaking of strange and delightful, on July the 30th, John Boorman's Zardos. Yes, I remember reading the review in Cream magazine, the contemporaneous review, which was something like, "Gun is good, penis is evil, Zardos has spoken," which was a bit of a mangling of the quotation, but, you know, you get the idea. We have a novel coming up on the book club on Friday. I'm very much enjoying it. It's called The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, and it's written by Ron Hansen. We have Alex Berenson's cautionary book about marijuana called Tell Your Children on July the 17th. And on July the 24th, we have a very strange work of art by G.K. Chesterton, The Napoleon of Notting Hill. And on July 31st, we have Ryan Landry's book, which is getting very good notices. It is called Masculinity Amidst Madness. So let's have one final look at the chat, and we are out of here. Visionary Companion says, "I remember when those poor blacks having mustard dump on their heads in a southern Woolworth seemed like persecuted martyrs. Those photos fooled me all those years ago." It must have been a long time ago. But it's always the 1960s on PBS, in the media generally. Let's tell the story about the anti-war movement again. Oh, no, God, please don't. Let's talk about Woodstock and how it led to how Monterey led to Woodstock, which led to Altima. No, please, not again, not again. Although, having said that, I have seen the Monterey film, Monterey pop film. It just seemed like a good time was had by all, and it really gives you an idea of just how quickly things got ugly in that scene. Jim Bowden says, "KMG, I think, and please correct me if I am wrong, that you are becoming more aware." No, I'm not going to answer that. Not going to answer that. This is my good Fial Raven, says Chogokin 666. Okay. This is my good taste show. Remember that. Zardos is an enigma, says Manfred von Tisselbaum. I can't tell if it's good or not. Well, it's got some pretty unique costuming for Sean Connery. Also, mustache and hairstyle. Let's see. Now I'm angry. Those are magnificent cameras. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. Thank you all for being here, wherever you might have found yourself. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd greatly appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so previously. If you would like to support the show, you can send donations to my PayPal account at kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And I leave you with this: in these times of social atomism and civilizational destruction, I do dearly hope that all of my dear listeners and viewers manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.